And take it away, Mark.
Thank you, John. Well, guys, so happy to see you here today. Um, Today, we're delighted to have a feature from the United Kingdom featuring Julia Webb, Tom Sastry, Martin Figuera, and Helen Ivory, who, of course, are regulars of the show, or have been, appeared at least once, I think, every year since we started, or close to. Um, Before we start with the feature, though, we're going to hear from our co-hosts. Here's Jeffrey Cyphers writes. He received his MFA after studying with Allen Ginsberg, and he's known as a new romantic poet. He's also a publisher, critic, eco-activist, impresario, filmmaker, puppeteer, and artist. He's the author of 19 books of verse, including Blue Lyre and Party Everywhere. His poems have appeared in the Cafe Review, New American Writing, the Brooklyn Rail, Posit, and many others. Also in the anthologies Best American Poetry, New York Insiders, and Contemporary Surrealist and Magical Realist Poetry. Jeff's latest work is a book of sonnets and artwork called Doppelgangster, and came out with Mad Hat Press. And Jeff also, not too long ago, won the Sir Vision James Tate Prize. That book is out. What's the name of that book, Jeff?
Fuel for Love.
There you go, Fuel for Love. Take it away, Jeff.
Well, thank you very much, Mark. It's great to see you guys. Representatives here from all over the world, 3 continents, 18 states, 16 protests, and one Germany. What? Yeah, I'm here too. I want to say hi. Well, hi, Rufus. How you been? I've been very good, very good. Thank you. And what do you want to do for us today, Rufus? Well, I want to read my little haiku, I wrote this haiku thinking of John Wessick, who you've heard of, right? And it's called Running from the Mirror. Nothing to see. I can't be a candle without a flame. White by the river, dewberry flowers validate the lost mist. Why, thank you, Rufus. Was that a haiku? Sort of, yes, it was. And why did you dedicate it to John? I love him. What? Yeah, no, really, I love everybody. But the dewberry is from New Hampshire, I think. Do you? Yeah, that's what I think. Yeah. Well, thank you, Rufus. Now go drink my drink, okay? Yeah. Oh, thank you, Rufus. That was really fun. Oh, nothing like a new haiku, even if I couldn't write one. My friend there. I think I stole that word, running from the mirror, from a rock and roll song I heard. So I wanted to read my poem called No Kings, but in Your Closet or something like that, but I didn't actually have any like I wanted to read today. But because of our prior conversation, I very much thought this would be a fun poem, and it's called, it's timely in one way, and it's called Classic Mad Hattin, with a tip off to Mad Hat Press. And my book, Doppelgangster. Yay, thank you, Mark. And okay, Classic Mad Hattin. Use locally sourced rye whiskey. Today we are using Defiant from upstate. Play Nina Simone's Memphis in June. Pit 3 Bing cherries and put them into a chilled tumbler. Add 2 ounces chilled Defiant rye. Add 1/2 ounce chilled sweet vermouth. Add 1 ounce chilled tart cherry juice. 2-3 dashes of bitters. Today we're using The Bitter Truth. Strain over ice. It's an instant classic, like you. Making it up as we go. It's Manhattan in June. The fountains titter over their fortunes. And so it is Manhattan in June, right? Yay, thank you. It's always good to work some music into your poem if you can, right? So I didn't think Cassandra was going to be here. I'm going to introduce our co-host here, Cassandra Atherton. And Cassandra is an award-winning prose poet, international expert on prose poetry. Her prose poetry is widely anthologized and has been translated into Japanese, Chinese, and Korean. Cassandra has published more than 30 books, and she's currently writing. That's amazing. That's like 5 books a year, right? And you're currently writing an illustrated book of prose poetry on the Hiroshima Maidens with funding from the Australia Council and the Victorian government. Cassandra co-wrote prose poetry and introduction and co-edited the anthology of Australian prose poetry. She's commissioning editor for Westerly magazine and professor of writing and literature in Melbourne, Australia. And she has a PhD in sparkling, and now she's going to tell us. Cassandra.
That's very sweet. I have a strange poem today called Toenail. I used to be a dancer for a lot of my life, and toenails would get stuck in ballet shoes all the time. And I had to write a poem for an anthology about objects. So I decided to write about a toenail. I keep my toenail in a matchbox, bloodied and jagged. Sometimes I touch the edge where it was ripped from my nail bed. Talisman, it is the first of many toenails turning creamy with age. There are slices of other toenails wedged in old point shoes. Some dig into the inside of puffy toe pads, and many nails are stuck along meters of toe tape. I think about drilling a hole in the top of the toenail and wearing it around my neck like a shark tooth or a shell pendant. But I'm not sure that people would understand it's much more than just an old toenail. Sometimes I feel bad for the toenail and wonder if it's happy being liberated from my toe, or whether it yearns to be reattached. I worry the toenail might be claustrophobic in the matchbox, even though it spent its entire life in boxes. At the academy, my toes were always suffocating, but I loved the feeling of their confinement. For years, they were packaged in wooden toe boxes, wrapped in pink satin with ribbons. A parcel of toes. A present of toes. Here, have some toes, I imagine saying. Happy birthday, I got you some toes. Perhaps all dead point shoes are just toenail coffins, a ghosting of toes on their undersides. And now I would like to introduce the intrepid Mark Vincenz. He is, of course, a poet, fiction writer, translator, editor, publisher, designer, multi-genre artist, and musician. He has published many books of poetry, translations, and fiction, including more recently The Pearl Diver of Irunmani, The King of Prussia is Drunk on Stars, The Mayfly Codex, and the recently released, I hope you've checked out his Facebook, Spells for the Wicked with Unlikely Books. Forthcoming poetry collections are Ironclad with Spite and Dival, All the Tricks of Language with Dos Madres Press, and next year, No More Animal Poems with White Pine Press, also accompanied by a post-classical music and spoken word album, which I've heard a snippet and it's ridiculous. It will blow your mind. A chapbook, Rocket Ship to the Andromeda Galaxy, was just released. Mark is also a prolific translator, and he translates from German, Romanian, Spanish, Icelandic, and French. He has published 12 books of translations, including most recently An Audible Blue, Selected Poems 1963 to 2016 by award-winning Swiss poet and novelist, I'm sure you remember his name, Klaus Mertz, and it won the 2023 Massachusetts Book Prize for Translated Literature. His newest book of translations, In the House, Still Light, by Klaus Mertz, is forthcoming in the fall. His own work has been translated into many languages. Join in. Japanese, Chinese, Russian, French, Italian, Spanish, Romanian, Greek, German, and Icelandic. He is currently working on a novel entitled The Age of Occasions. Vincenz is editor and publisher of Mad Hat Press and publisher of New American Writing. Here we go. He's lived all over the world, from Brazil to China to Iceland to India. He was born in Matilda Hospital on the Peak in Hong Kong, but he now lives on a farm in rural western Massachusetts, overlooking Herman Melville's Greylock Mountain, Melville's inspiration for Moby Dick, where there are still more, wait for it, spineless hornworts, clammy hedge hyssops, and little cloating hearts than 10-toed bipedal earthlings. I like a little cloating heart. Mark, what do they look like?
It's a plant, actually.
Oh, well, it sounds very lovely. I hope you have a
I realize
fantastic...
I spend so much time on moving organisms, I need to spend a little bit more time on more stationary organisms.
Good idea.
At least in
Good
the
idea.
literal sense. At least in the literal sense, anyway. And did you notice that I had toes in the end of that?
Yeah, 10 ones.
Right. By chance, by chance,
By chance. You never know.
or maybe it's synchronicity.
We're just in tune.
This is called Loving William Tell, starring Lorenz Vincenz Senior, who was my grandfather, in 8 loving acts. 1. Any worthy Etruscan chef. My grandfather Tut, like any worthy Etruscan chef, said he always dreamed profoundly but inefficiently. Those practical Sangiovese Romans, he would sometimes mutter begrudgingly over a glass of Vino Nobile Montepulciano entwined in the smoke fumes of a hand-twisted Ticinese Culebra cigar, while contemplating the most up-to-date method for browning pork chops in chipolata onions, butter, and balsamic vinegar. 2. The coconut gathers. He excelled in many other ways. For example, in Grandmother Tata's dog-eared photo album that had a whiff of cold cream, Seratum Refrigiant, there was a black and white of him at the age of 20-something raising a solid pine wood door with 7 beefy lads in various lazing poses perched upon it, millimeters above his freshly brill-creamed and widow-peaked head. In a bridge game for 5, cards raised, Grandmother casually recalled that evening that the church bells had rung half an hour early. We were particularly blessed that night, she said, flicking her second ace of that hand. 3. Crossbow and apple. Another shtick Tat relished was bouncing a razor-sharp carving knife on his hefty biceps while preparing a bouillabaisse for 27 hungry Swiss Army recruits. He also claimed he could with ease, crossbow in hand, cigar fuming beneath his ample moustache, snag a hat trick. He could hit a fly at 27 yards, a hair's breadth above the head of his eldest and most promising child, ratifying thereby the Constitution of the Swiss Confederation. When, at the age of 75, he summoned all his zeal, demonstrated for us his skill on the parallel bars, we never again doubted his wile. 4. Cocktails and other perils. Was it Max Frisch who said that Switzerland never generated sufficient literature to render a single postcard, all the black and white photos of Edelweiss and the Matterhorn notwithstanding? But truth be told, that too is not quite true. Just because we are neutral outsiders believe we are stand on the fences who let our little coattails rattle gently in the cool, whimsical mountain breeze. We do as everyone does. We too have faith in the word, Tut said, chewing at the bit of his best rosewood pipe. 5. A season of cheeses. And although he neglected his faith in idiom, Tut savored his cheeses, an air-cured Wurstel pickles, doused in alpine herbs and garlic-infused rabbit, gently roasting on the spit, and that long, twisted cigar he smoked like a shy world fuming within herself. 6. Almonds and goats. Once he told me he'd worshipped the gleaming brass buttons on his Welsh girlfriend's tight little lederhosen. She wore them as and when the Alpine phone finally broke. Oh, and the transmutations of truffles in the hidden valleys, and the ideal subgenera of pig most suited to snorting beneath the dirt of certain oak trees, and the almost undetectable delectable pheasants clicking to their hearts' soothing mercies, or the wolves of creation circling softly, crisscrossing national boundaries on transnational whims. This, he told me, while sipping on an after-dinner Armagnac and loading his pipe with something unusual from Algiers. 7. Nuts and pasta and castanets. There will always be another carbohydrate revolution, said Tut, sifting the semolina. No one wants someone else to crack an egg over their head. Eventually, just like ravioli, someone's revolt will spread. That's why we remain neutral in all things, said he, slicing a piece of ham for the filling, but then tossing it out the window at a stray dog. 8. Primavera and Pinole. And they who dreamed of Switzerland and her clean vitrified alpine air, said he, tearing up while peeling an onion. She with her bountiful coffers of conifers and pine cones and their fine courses, and those little ants by the bazillions, fertilizing pine trees and harvesting the pine nuts for their little pine children. As such, the discourse between father and pining offspring, said he, crushing the garlic, chopping the chives, brutally massaging the chicken breasts in their salty, musty brine. A little bit of salty, musty brine never hurt anybody. And next we hear from Julia Webb, who is a neurodivergent writer who lives in Norwich, UK. She has 4 poetry collections with 9 arches. Bird Sisters from 2016, Threat from 2019, The Telling from 2022, and Grey Time from 2025. She has a first-class honours degree in creative writing from Norwich University of the Arts and a poetry MA from the University of East Anglia. In 2011, she won the Poetry Society's Stanza competition, and in 2018, she won the Battered Moons Poetry competition. Julia has had 2 poems highly commended in the Forward Prize and has taught creative writing for organizations such as Lapidus, Mind, Norfolk County Council, and the SAW Trust. And in 2018, she was writer-in-residence on Norwich Market. Julia currently runs real-world and email poetry courses and mentors for The Writing Coach. She is a steering editor for the journal Lighthouse, the journal for new writers. Welcome, Julia.
Thank you so much. It's lovely to be here. Yeah, thank you. That was a very nice intro. So I'm going to read tonight from a bit from my new collection, which comes out in a couple of weeks, and also a little bit from The Telling, which was my previous collection, just because the two sort of tie together a bit. So my new collection, one of the theme that kind of ties it together is grief and loss. So I'm going to start with a poem from The Telling. When I was in my 20s, my first partner was killed in a car accident, and the next 2 poems are about that, and this one is about the year following that. That year, there was a hurricane inside me. I was all arms and legs and panic, and no one could stop my river bursting its banks. Things were getting smashed, and I was powerless to stop it. No one had explained to me what to do when the big winds came. First, the tiles lifted clean off the roof and dumped themselves at my feet. And then the rain arrived, lashing and ferocious, soaking the bed linen. That year, nothing much made sense. And I made a storm shelter of myself, so that when the flood warnings sounded, I didn't hear them. I lay curled on my camp bed, oblivious, until the shelter began slowly filling up. So this next one is from Grey Time, and it's about that kind of paralysis that you can get in the face of extreme grief. When I went to my partner's funeral, I wasn't able to speak and I wasn't even able to cry. If ever there's a time for crying. I was the cold face of the moon in a sky full of glitter. I was a shut book, my pages stuck together. I was the driest-eyed person in the place. My eyes burned, small suns inside dry sockets. I was a tree standing resolute against the force of the wind. Everyone else was showing how much they loved you, but I was hollow at my middle. You were oblivious under a blanket of flowers. I was full of the emptiness you had given me. I was a rocky island with no safe landing place. I was the blank paper on the table at the end of an exam. I was on top of the pyre, waiting for a whiff of petrol. This next one is also about from Grey Time, and it's about those bad decisions that you can make when your life feels like it's gone a bit wrong. I opened the door and let violence in. I cooked violence dinner. I poured violence a glass of wine. I introduced violence to my friends. I took violence to the pub. I laughed at violence's jokes. I let violence seduce me. I ran violence a bath and we got in it together. I let violence pin me down. I let violence lock me up. I showed violence I was sorry, but I was not sorry. I slept in violence's arms. I let violence hand me the blame. I believed violence's truths until I didn't. So I'm going to go back to the telling now. And this is the first poem in the book. And when I was writing this, I was thinking about generational trauma and how trauma is handed down from the parents to the children. But I'd also watched a documentary about the band Lynyrd Skynyrd, some of whom died in a plane crash, and the images from that somehow tied themselves together in my head with this idea of generational trauma. Crash site. We remember only vaguely now the wreckage of our mother, her damaged fuselage suspended precariously between two broken pine trees. How carefully one had to tread so as not to bring the whole thing down. And everywhere the stink of spilled aviation fuel, at least in the beginning. So we never did find that black box, so it was unclear exactly what had happened, and each survivor told a different story. But the wreckage was there for all to see. Seats and belongings scattered far and wide, things broken open, life jackets snagged on jagged branches. Though our mother's windows had popped out with the pressure, she sometimes talked affectionately about the plummet, but swore she could remember nothing of our other life before takeoff. Our first memory was the screaming of metal and the silence which came after. Funeral party. I barely remember now the shape and colour of her coffin, though I know I must have picked it out. How solid she was for one so empty of herself. 6 men it took to carry her from cart to grave, while appropriate sleet stung our hands and faces. She should have been there, carrying her staff, her dress hem dragging in the mud, her black hat keeping the weather from her hair as we stood beneath dripping trees. As they lowered the coffin, she might have sung a song or recited a poem in the voice I barely remember. So this next poem is the second poem from the new collection, and it started life as an ekphrastic poem. I never know if you should say ekphrastic or ekphrasis, but so I was looking at I'd been on a trip with a friend of mine to go and find my mum's grave. She was buried out in rural Wiltshire in Britain in a woodland burial place that's quite hard to get to. And when we got there, it was completely overgrown and we couldn't find it, even though we had a map. But I found it really hard when I was researching all around grief. I kept thinking I should write about it and I just couldn't. And I was looking at this piece of artwork called Felt Suit by Joseph Beuys. And it's a suit made of coarse grey felt that looks almost brown, and it has no buttons or fastenings or linings or anything. And he made 100 identical bits of the copies of these suits. And the suits are often made of felted hair or rabbit fur. And somehow it sort of triggered me to be able to write about this thing that happened when we went looking for my mum's grave. The hair. He brings something with him, a chill that creeps inside the bones and through the blood. Winter, with all its ice and snow, is coming. I feel it in the air, hear it in the wind that shivers through the trees. The hair feels it too. This hair that might be a dream or might be real, and is as big as the one I thought was my mother in the woodland burial ground last summer. That day when the weather was warm as a kiss, and the foliage densely lush and green, and the map I had printed out so vague that I couldn't find her grave. But there they were, the hare and the deer, crossing our path by the badger set, and just as sudden, gone again. The hare, the biggest I have ever seen, the same colour as that suit hung in the gallery. No buttons or markings, just brown felt. I wore it in my dreams for weeks after, my skin naked and itchy beneath its pelt. A penance, perhaps, for not trying hard enough to find her. Like that day in the church, when I opened my mouth to speak and no words came. My father says he has forgotten how to make a storm. And though lightning still crackles from his fingertips, he doesn't know how to throw it anymore. And he has become so used to the thunder in his head that now he hardly hears it. He just turns up his hearing aid or switches the radio on. The news is always bad these days, he tells me, as if it wasn't always so. I don't think I was ever able to make lightning. Though I carry my own thunder, it rumbles around inside me, threatening to spill out. My father's newest house is a house of calm, though he is still the god of rain clouds. In our old house, all those years ago, he and our mother crashed against each other and made the most tremendous noise. So I'm going to finish with a newish poem, and it's called Happiness. happiness. Thanks for listening, by the way. Happiness used to come as the sound of the wind in the leaves of the late summer trees. And it still does sometimes, but today it's crouching in the corner of this room as I read a book on my Kindle. The house empty, and my own briefly, knowing I have nowhere to be and nothing expected of me. And though the housework still exists, I have closed my mind to it. But happiness is also 30 miles down the road, making footprints that disappear quickly in the damp sand as the waves wash over its toes. And here it is again in the house, this house, where I never thought it could be. And it's in my hand as I move the cursor across the screen, and it places its headphones over my ears and fills them with the music of the past. Happiness, that thing we think of as so elusive, that rises each morning at 6 a.m. with the sparrows and twitters around the garden, or thumps down with cat paws from the neighbour's fence. Yesterday, a delivery driver brought me some, masquerading as the season's first asparagus, which I look forward to every year because it takes me back to the years on the farm. Tomorrow, the postman will bring me some more, disguised as coffee, with tasting notes of chocolate and walnuts. They say that happiness is fleeting, and of course, it might be. But somehow, in some form, it always seems to come again. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Julia. Next, we hear from Tom Sastry, who is a political, ironic, emotional, morbid, and funny in all the wrong places. In March of this year, he published Life Expectancy Begins to Fall, a book of poems about people whose retirement plan is dying in the climate wars and whose current plan is getting on with things in the meantime. That particular book was described by the Costa Award-winning poet Jonathan Edwards as the most important and certainly the most entertaining book about the end of the world I've yet found. Tom's previous books have variably been from the Poetry Book School of the Year, Poetry Book Society Patent of Choice, highly commended in the Forward Prize, and shortlisted the Seamus Heaney First Collection Prize. Welcome, Tom.
Thank you very much, and it's such a privilege to follow Julia. Because I am the next reader, I didn't have to distract myself from the reading by making nice comments, because I get the chance to say what a wonderful collection of poems that I have loved, poems that I've passed over, and poems I'm looking forward to getting to know. That was really wonderful. I'm going to start with a poem this is where the book starts, and it's a poem in which the potential for comedy and tragedy is present, but I think you know which way it's going to go. This is the origin story of the bad guy, and it's called Billionaire Origin Story. A boy in my school blew things up. He'd heard about the Big Bang, how dust from a great explosion in a few short billion years made stars, planets, lakes, dinosaurs, his own complicated thoughts. He'd heard the Earth was dying, so he decided to play God, creating new worlds, atomizing other people's sports shoes, the food waste bin, finally, catastrophically, the rabbit hutch. They took him away, taught him to be a thought leader. The dust he raised, his disruptive hope, clouded our century's air, dull dirt, hammered guesses of a monkey Shakespeare. The world we had flaked into chaos, heat, flood, hunger, strange seasons of the troubled heart, more votes for more dust, sunsets to die for. We tried everything. A funeral for the rabbit, calling storms weather, imagining ourselves as dandelion seeds, history as a summer breeze. The next poem begins at the exit to an underground railway station, a tube station, a subway station, and all the feet are rising up out of the subway station into the light. And it's called Hatching. Overwhelmed by the press of bodies, I stretch for balance. The wing beats in my rib cage extend to my fingernails, troubling every bone. I step out of the crowd, into my mind, where everything is its own animal, so I can be a naturalist, observing the city. Shoes rise up from the tube station, a swarm of footwear emptying the hive to pollinate the cloud with its emails. My people. I don't have the kind of solidarity that refuses to grieve for its own when everything is dying at a different pace. The coughing faces trying to make peace with their breath for the sake of a morning smile. Where I once believed the bird trapped in my chest was love, now I feel great anger at tiny things. I am brooding a revolution that needs sharper talons than mine. The day it opens out my ribs and soars, leaving me on the street, a broken shell. A lot of these poems are about the way in which the times we live in seem to demand a stark choice between heroic virtue and being on the wrong side of history or being terrible. But actually, most people are neither heroes and villains, and human complexity makes that kind of very binary way of weighing our own actions and those of other people quite reductive. And I think that paradox is right the way through. Well, it's the time we live in, isn't it? And so this is a short poem that addresses that directly. It's not called Untitled because I'm not a pretentious visual artist who just calls all my works untitled, but because there are lots of untitled poems in the book, I often just call them untitled when I'm reading them. So anyway. Good people are doing nothing again, swearing off doom scrolling, relieved if their kids think more about Taylor Swift than calories or Armageddon, quietly refusing to abandon problematic friends, making rent, holding it together when they should be holding leaders accountable, keys in a fist at the bus stop. In addition to politics, one of the ways I think in which people try and cope with the enormity of the historical events that they have to live through, and this predicament is not new, is spirituality. And like politics, it offers some very incomplete and unsatisfactory answers, I think, to the problem of how we live in the times that we have to live in. And so this poem is about the concept of spiritual bypassing, which I'm sure many of you know is the use of a spiritual buzzword or phrase to block someone else from saying something that's real and urgent for them. So if I were to say my leg is on fire and you were to say you should cultivate an attitude of acceptance, that would be spiritual bypassing. And it occurred to me that I do this in reverse as a very skeptical person. I hear someone say something in spiritual language, or even worse, the language of self-improvement or wellness, and I think, oh, well, that's a bit woo. And so I dismiss it, even if it is something that is real to them. And so that's what this poem is about. It's called spiritual bypassing. The self is a mirage, wrote the very online person, with an expensive traveling yoga habit, for whom the universe often manifests expensive gifts. With a jolt, I remembered my father, saying, I have come to the conclusion that I do not exist, and how the illusion of me preferred to connect with the illusion of him. by switching on the cricket and keeping an unexamined silence, our lantern brains turning action into statistics, his breath continuing its duty. I'm going to go away from family dynamics, which is a subject which I have only a faint grasp of, having lived as part of a family all my life and never having had a slightest clue as to how it all works, to something which I'm much more familiar with, which is when going back to the apocalypse. And when I was growing up in the 1980s, there was one absolutely undisputed top apocalypse, which is nuclear war. If anything was going to finish us all, it was definitely going to be the bomb. And since then, nuclear war has slid down the apocalypse charts thanks to various scenarios for climate breakdown, pandemic disease, the rise of authoritarianism. Unfortunately for nuclear war, it is now a kind of mid-table, unfashionable apocalypse scenario. And so I wrote this poem because I'm always a champion of the underdog, just to say, cheer up, nuclear war. Your time will come again, which, if you watch the news, seems quite likely. So this poem is after Susanna Evans, a wonderful poet from Sheffield, UK, and it's called A Pre-Loved Film from the Vintage Shop at History's End. They drop the bomb, but I press fast rewind on the VHS. The great mushroom nestles back into a spore. The blast wave contracts, squeaking through the static lines as the fallout that was the skate ramp on the wreck is sucked back from 3 skies away, extending the brief celebrity of its taggers. Geigering wraiths in retro PPE run backwards into unrubbled fire stations, slide up the poles as windows blink into their frames. Grass, crocuses and trees implode into miracle green. Stonehenge rises on its hooves, and underneath, in a top-secret bunker, an old-school civil servant reseals a tin of continuity rations, recedes stiffly through the airlock. Unboom, says the title card, in some versions, moob, and then. I watch my own small body, lifted from the recklessly turned earth, to walk forward in time again, wishing that Morrissey had stopped in 1987. The possibility of other disasters survives with me. Factories rust and fall, coal is burnt elsewhere, ice retreats, soil thins. There are new plagues and old hatreds. In the chapel of a perfect night, I can hear the world sing the song of its own ending from the soundtrack to the movie of my life. I give each danger a year or two, then tape over the warnings. This is all quite dark stuff, and I think we have to take consolation where we can. And one of the things I think about our national character, certainly in England, is it's always struck me as incredible that we had to borrow a word from German to describe the pleasure we take in the misfortunes of others, the word being Schadenfreude, because it seems so integral to who we are as a people. And I think one of the things we can enjoy as the world spirals into chaos is that the billionaire that we met in the first poem is not going to get off this planet alive any more than we are, but we know it and he doesn't. So I used to read this poem and I used to invite people to imagine their least favorite billionaire in the scenario of this poem. But now we all have the same least favorite billionaire. I just say, Elon, this one is for you. And it's called The Preserved Body of a Billionaire Slowly Defrosts in a Devastated World. His generators have better uses. The great cables are hacked through. In the vault, a damp ego wakes to his several blinks of deferred life. He thought we'd greet him with life-supporting devices, harvest his sperm to improve the species. Instead, 5 members of a semi-ironic fandom gather to witness the last miracle of a collapsed age. This is no country for thawed-out men with medical histories stored on long corrupted hard drives. It's not his time. It's the one he made. And my final poem tonight is a poem called The Resistance. And I thought this was a good place to end because I have no answers to how we how we deal with the hand that history has dealt us variously in the various places we live. And I do oscillate between thinking we should be doing something dramatic and brave and heroic, and thinking that if you can keep your compassion alive and your kindness alive and those small virtues alive, you are doing something extraordinary. And so I always laugh when people talk about very small domestic things as if they're a form of resistance. But I also think actually that's rather a good way to think. So this is, and I'm leaning into that here, this is 4 people sitting in a garden. And they are talking about the worst things in the world, but they're also talking about the things they admire and love about each other. And they are the resistance. We are spaced out under the awning in Hannah's garden. I love the shock of the rain. It feels like despair exhausting itself. We're outdoors for my sake. I'm the oldest, the only one who talks about living longer than I can work. The sky clears. There's a bowl warming my hand. I am taking my sense of smell for granted again. The extravagant script of the peas climbs the bamboo poles in the long evening light. I want to be alive, as if I'm not already. There are 60 harvests left. Hannah is using the soil while we have it. Hope calls this the most radical act. This makes sense as admiration and love. Nothing happens in the most lavish way. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Nothing happens in the most lavish way. Next, we hear from Martin Figuera, whose collection and show, Whistle, were shortlisted for the Ted Hughes Award and won the 2013 Saboteur Award for Best Spoken Word Show. His other collections are Shed and Dr. Siemens' Catastrophe Machine, which were both published in 2016. In 2021, he was Salisbury New NHS Writer-in-Residence, and the resulting pamphlet, My Name is Mercy, out from Fairacre Press, won a National NHS Award. A second pamphlet from Fairacre Press, 16 Sonnets for Care, came out in October 22. His latest collection, which came out fairly recently, I think, is The Remaining Men, which was published by Cinnamon Press and is shortlisted in the Norfolk Arts Awards. Welcome, Martin.
Sorry, just unmuting. Thank you, Mark. Thank you so much for the invitation. And it's so great to be reading with Tom and Julia, who Helen and I got to choose. And we had a very short conversation and we agreed very quickly who to read with. I think you can see why. I'm going to read from Shed, which has got lots of lovely illustrations from Julia's son in it, actually. You can't really see them, no point in showing you really. But, and it's now a show, which I'm going to tour next year, but I did at Stanza Festival in Scotland a couple of months ago. It's about this kind of solitary figure who's retreated to his shed on the most eastern coast of England, and he kind of drifts between lucidity and psychosis. The show is full of sort of totems, creatures, and magical contraptions. And I'm just going to start and go through to the end. It's the book's made up of 5-line stanzas, and it kind of, yeah, well, it's hard to explain really, other than I'm going to read it. Okay, and it starts with a Dictionary definition. Sheddism, noun. Sheddism, belief that beauty and fulfillment can be found in solitary hours and the occasional performance of useful tasks should you so desire, that one's existence can be established through the hoarding of useful objects, that true evil is the disposal of anything, however broken. I'm pondering the concept of shedness. A shed is an object. It can take many forms. Did God create the one and only original shed, or was it the carpenter? And what of the painter with his creosote hands? If there's a porch, is it not a summer house? My shed is visible on Google Earth, is a face-down book, compendium, Wunderkammer, Matryoshka, Ammonite, Carapace, Circus, Columbarium, a tiny theatre of solace, and I am a common beetle in a matchbox. Prise the rusted lid from a paint tin with the blunt head of a screwdriver, lift the bright red O of fuming meniscus, hang it like a small cloak on a nail, remain watchful. I hammer nails into the workbench, circle on circle. My arachnid companion and I weave, he with his silk, I with white string, neither of us seeking conversation, just to be left alone with our work. The mortise gauge scribes the beechwood, the T-bevel marks up your angle of pins. Dovetail joints can be traced back to the very first dynasty of ancient Egypt. Your chisel must be sharp, the mallet wielded with a soft hand. Marriage is sometimes unforgiving. The box has a secret compartment. A little pressure releases the false pin, springs a lid to reveal the clockwork mechanism. Beech symbolizes knowledge, learning and understanding. I'm invisible behind the latch, face away from the house with its patio doors where the family can be seen going about their business. Trees are stoical observers and recorders of time. I've covered the window with bin liners, let light creep through a small aperture. The hill appears fuzzy and upside down on the creased white sheet. Sheep drift on their backs, speak to their dark sky. When my boy was a boy, I'd let him enter once he'd answered a simple riddle. Spider enjoyed his visits, abseiled onto his ticklish ear to listen to us making wishes while a toy train scoops around and around its small loop. We'd arrange our treasures in a seed tray, green with mildew and algae, fuse wire, a rusted door lock, bad news torn from a newspaper, a silver sixpence, a mollusk's abandoned house. A cock's apple gleams in the cracked light, perfectly weighted and waxen in my hand. I place it on the windowsill to commence an alphabet with the blue bottle and the neighbour's creeping cat. Blue bottle puzzles at the impossibility of glass. Spider is awake to the possibilities of the Unitarian faith's seventh principle. Respect for the interdependent web of all existence of which we are a part. I worship the pale, mottled moon, the camellia so laden with flowers, ham sandwiches in greaseproof paper, the flask and the cup. I am a farmer blinking at the bright horizon, fallen to my knees and praying for my homestead and its parched earth. There's a cloud of dust on the track, moving this way through the shimmer of heat. The hurricane lamp and moths present a phantasmagoria against lumen-filled jars and cedar walls. The shed window is a magic lantern of flickering terrors. Spider rolls sixes and sevens on his web. The gaggle raise their goosey heads, call home in noisy panic, send little creatures scurrying to their underworld. The valley's an estuary with no lights on the opposite shore. The shed, a creaking landlocked boat. I've plugged my ears with candle wax, still the shriek of night, grind of metal, rush of fire, my pulsing blood its fearful way, my flinching heart a mouse under its pitch-felt roof, amongst all of the slop and the rickety shelves. The Ice Age forged its treasured path from the sea and left a valley of stones. On an unearthed stone you may find a memento mori, ammonite, fern, skeletal fish, or the jaw of some forgotten little beast. At night the shed window is a toothless mouth, my face held softly in its jaws. How gloomy I must look, with my corona of white hair and cow gummy eyes. I could mistake a hurricane for simple rain. Let the shed fill with groundwater. In 1,000 years' time, archaeologists with soft brushes may discover my shed rotted and inside out, illuminate my stone flesh in a museum display case. The apples puckered around the stalk like a smoker's mouth, surrenders a crescent moon to a thumbnail, gives itself too easily, is no longer desirable. I have taken my soul from behind its ribs with a rusted saw, dismantled it on the workbench. A hairball was the problem. While I have it apart, I thoroughly clean every piece, then carefully put it back all slippy with oil. Send for the priest so I might confess to all my bodged and abandoned jobs. Anoint my hands with castrol so the small mistakes of my knuckles attest my failure, shine as if from wood. Place the broken engine of a washing machine on my lap. The small weight will be a comfort. Pierce the grey skin of my blisters with a bradle and instruct the priest to dip a paintbrush in their sap and administer extreme unction. I've constructed an orrery from paraphernalia hooked up to an old carpentry drill. The sun's orbiting planets, my small consolations. Neptune, a gold sailing boat. Jupiter, a broken cup. Saturn, a battered cricket ball. The Earth, a padlock. Venus, a sheep. Mercury, a red Titan bus. Code is string and floating loose about the place. I snag it with the lawn rake, twist it spaghetti fashion into a heap. In theory, it may become useful and put an end to all the speculation. What I say here goes unheard. Still, I cover my mouth while speaking. The birds are lip readers and terrible gossips in cahoots with the twitchers in the woods. I have the clinging taste of cobweb on my tooth-scraped tongue, inspect Spider for any trace of a smirk. I'm beginning not to trust him. Yesterday there was the husk of a blue bottle in my tea. The cake crust of the hover mower gives to the pen life, releases sour musker, couldn't give a fuck, fox strolls across the blank lawn, barks, pigeons applaud and flee the copse. I'm holed up on the run from the law, belly down in the grit with the crawlers and the dead. Somewhere a twig snaps in the dark, then a sudden rain of noise and splinters of glass and spouts of paint. A hemp sack tight to my face, catching at the evening shadow, my breath is wet and sweet. I imagine the floor falling away, raw rope at my throat. The Army and Navy trench tool folds over itself, as easy to maneuver in a tight, thorny space. Its cold metal is tracing the dour trickle of water in the undergrowth to its source. The fledglings have flown their nests and I've taken to burrowing between the bridle path and my neighbour's fence panels, armed with gardening gloves, canvas hat and secateurs, hawthorn and bramble, their thorns. I hack through bindweed and discover fossils curled like sleeping dogs in the foul water, pulled about my expedition boots, the Abyssinian cat pads slow as ice through clawed goosegrass, craving the feathery crunch of tiny bones. Shh, listen. Listen for carpentry, the mallet's sudden clunk, an insistent hacksaw, the clack, clack, clack of hammer on nail, the pencil's drawn out rasp, sandpaper and the moon, the peel of soft wood from a blade, sawdust falling. I shall blacken my fingernails with the claw hammer, hold my hand aloft to God so I might pass into the small heaven of infinite tasks. Take my skull and crossbone pop bottles from their high shelf, open them. Let your eyes sting and throat catch. If there are tears, let there be tears. Turn the transistor radio down to a murmur and leave. Lock the door behind you. Toss the key of the heavy padlock into the nettle patch. Hand the priest a drink and let him have his say. There is lumber stacked against the fence. Summon men in overalls blackened with grease to carry the shed out through the squeaking gate over the stones into the retreating rush of the tide. I will fling my final roll up into the paraffin as they push me from shore, as the window flames and blackens and cracks, as a pillar of smoke is loosed to the sky. Place the power drill into the hands of my son. Lo there, do I see my father? Lo there, do I see his bent back, torn sweater and ball patch? Lo there, do I see the overawed multitudes in the aisles of Valhalla, where the ironmongery shelves go on forever. That's it. Oh, and breathe. Thank you.
Who doesn't want the ironmongery shelves to go on forever? The hooks and the nails and the screws and the hammers, right? Thanks so much, Martin. Fantastic. Next we hear from Martin's other half, Helen Ivory, who is a poet and visual artist who's made shadow boxes and collages and all sorts of hyper interesting things. Helen was awarded a Chol Mondley Award.
No, you were right the first time.
Sorry?
Sorry, you were right the first time. Chumley.
Chumley Award. Okay. Chol Mondley Award.
I can't hear you now.
Can you hear us?
Sorry.
Are you got some interesting like double digital thing, like extra reverb going on?
Yeah.
Oh, whoa.
How weird. Yeah.
I think maybe one of you has to turn off their mic or something like that. Maybe Martin, turn yours off.
Is that all right?
Sounds okay. Okay.
Okay. Yeah, don't mess with me.
Anyway, so she won a Cholomley Award.
Chumley.
Award.
Yeah.
By the Society of Authors in 2024. Helen edits the webzine Ink, Sweat and Tears and has led workshops in a largely adult education setting for around 25 years. She teaches at the National Center for Writing Academy and Avon. A poem from her surrealist chapbook, Maps of the Abandoned City from Sir Vision, is one of the poems on the underground. She has work translated into Polish, Ukrainian, Croatian, Spanish, and Greek as part of the Versopolis European Poetry Platform. A Wunderkammer, a new unselected poems, appeared from Mad Hat in the US in 2023, and then Constructing a Witch in October from 2024 from Blood Axe in the UK, which is a PBS winner recommendation. In the summer of 2025, Constructing a Witch was translated into Greek by Nicholas Koutsondontis, which will be published in Greece by Thraka. Thanks and welcome, Helen.
Thank you very much. Well, lovely to be here. Thank you. So I'm going to be reading some poems from Constructing a Witch, which is about the monstering and othering of women. It's about kind of female power, disempowerment, the fear of aging femininity, and lots of stuff. It's about this poem is the second poem in the collection, and it's called Some Definitions of Witch. And because there are loads of definitions, so these are mine. You will have yours. So let's start with these. Some definitions of witch. Carcass of rags, the dead rat stink of old milk, a beyond the pale beggar runt of the litter. Gleaner of herbs, hallower of the compass, cunning hedge rider, measurer of fire. Midwife of shadows, low vixen with blood on its moor, deliverer of silence to the hen house. Lighter than a Bible, priestly ink is gravity beneath her flying feet. Her body writes into the sky. Blended with the earth, she wears a moss cloak. Some procure her remedy. She is a scapegoat for bad luck. A childless wraith in a child's picture book, the worst mother man ever invented. The method of kettling troublesome women, a peck of black pepper in the milk and water blether. Practitioner of forgotten ways, of rituals, sayer of spells, barefoot earth listener, older than God or television. So yeah, lots goes on in this book, but I kind of talk about, well, I think about kind of the dark, because I write a lot about the dark. And so in this book, there are some more thoughts about poems. And this is a little prose poem. It looks really square. Yeah, it looks kind of square on the page. More thoughts about the dark. If you take the dark for a walk across the ordinary light of this page, it will cover its eyes. It will grovel down inside its fur and beg to be taken to a time before language. The dark elects for inchoate echoes, where the imagination scratches pictures inside the hippocampus with its imaginary claw. The dark is not a nice man. The dark strenuously objects to honey owing to its close connection with the sun. When you open your mouth, you pour into the dark. When the dark opens its mouth, it pours into you. Have a care for the dark. So we were in the US like 2 years ago or something. It seems like a really long time ago. So we went to, as well as seeing Mark and staying with Mark, we also went to Salem, of course. And this is one of the poems that came from that. So in Salem, Samuel Parris, so he kind of, all these sermons that this is like 1692, right? And so this is a quote from one of his sermons, and lots of stuff was going on, war was going on, things were going on. And so this is part of his paranoia. So a quote from him: "The devil's prevalency in this age is most clear in the marvelous number of witches abounding in all places. Now is one word, it was a one-word sentence, so now, definitely now." So this poem is another prose poem. Samuel Parris dreams of dogs. The dogs tied up in the barn are doomsayers of the highest order. They bark at the sea and the oncoming tides, although they cannot see them with their very eyes. They hear the approach of occult spirits by cartload after whining cartload. They feel the march of fleas in their coats, little devils, piercing their skin with their mouth parts. The sun creeps over the floor, but the dogs are always in shadow. Midnight hangs over their heads like a bone-sharp tomahawk. And this one is it's another Salem poem. So the two people in this poem, Bridget Bishop, who's actually from Norwich, England, where I am right now, and she was the first person to be hanged at Salem during the witch trials. And the other person is Jonathan Corwin, who was the New England magistrate and one of the judges involved in the Salem witch trials. And in this poem, I imagine their spirits walking about the centre of Witch City right now. And I think she might have enjoyed modern day Salem a bit more than he. I don't know if anyone's been there, but it's kind of full of alternative people, and he would hate it. So this is Bridget Bishop, and her dates were 1632, Norwich, England, to 1692, that's Salem. Bridget Bishop. She strides dead through the centre of Witch City, past the statue of Elizabeth Montgomery with its cute nose and spurious broom. She strides out in her paragon bodice, gaudy as blood on God's laundered sheets. He sees her, Judge Corwin, that slatternly Eve, titivating her ribbons in the dress shop window, and all about uncivilly walking the streets on the Sabbath. The Eves, uncovered hair, tattooed naked arms, they ought to be stripped and whipped raw. Their spectres never meet. That is, she is oblivious to him. If a candle burns blue, she doesn't see it. So wrapped is she in the fire of the living. He levels his hat against this meddling tempest. His collar is tight on his neck these days. This poem, another little square-looking prose poem. It's called "The Gift." So there's lots of in kind of magic, in spells, in myth and story. There's lots about apples. Okay, and there's lots of kind of love magic and love spells around the apple. I mean, we know a famous one in the Bible. So in this poem, there are 3 spirits, which I heard about in the Witchcraft Museum in Boscastle in Cornwall. They are called Cosma, Synode, and Hoopody. I think their spirits very particular to that place. So the gift. There once was a lonely woman who replaced our heart with an apple. She took a sharp knife and engraved her name in its freshly shined skin, and those of the names of these spirits, Cosma, Synode, Hoopody. She stood in the middle of a bridge as the wind heaped bright dying leaves all about. She balanced the apple in the palm of her hand, but nobody came for her love. And the earth moved through the seasons, and still nobody came. This carried on till the apple resembled some devil, they say, and the woman herself had transmuted to dust. One day, a quiet pandemonium emanated from the apple, and the townspeople hid behind themselves, too cowed to approach. A man stepped from the crowd with the air of a judge. He decreed that, indeed, the apple was infested with foul spirits, and pitched it into the river with his long-legged boot. This one, yeah, as I was writing it, I thought, there's not enough poems written about the moon, is there? So I thought, so this is why I called this one More Thoughts About the Moon. Someone picked the moon to be your avatar. Swooned upon your beauty, he invented the metaphor for the fulgent, unreachable conundrum of your presence. When he got a grip on gravity, blathered on about the heady dance of earth and moon in each other's gravitational pull. He set himself up as the earth, of course. His ardour in your maiden and your mother days was resolute, but as you waned his word, he could only see the carrion, that old word for crone, scraping dead flesh off the underpass. A goddess is a goddess is a goddess. Why we name her as she orbits you, O earth? And if she appears all dark of the moon, it's just because your rotation is too fast. The moon's path around the earth is widening by the wingspan of a wood nymph moth each year. Perhaps it's finally time to take a hint. It seems she'd rather lay her bets on emptiness. Yeah, I mentioned earlier about a fear of aging femininity, and I've got a bit of that going on here. TikTok. All your life you've been expecting her to come rapping at your door. Let me in, let me in. She pushes at the tender fabric of the shelter you'd assembled with your bare hands. Don't you remember how they warned you about the woods? The woods are a darkly place where you meet your darkly self and further ghastly things. Why did you go? Why did you take your pretty light there? Why did you wear the woebegone smock of the crone when you could have been spring-step in a bright yellow dress? And now she's in your bath, skin draping from her bones. And now she's taking off her wedding ring, sliding it onto your finger with a gob of her spit. Okay, I have 3 more, if that's all right. I don't know. Yeah, it should be time-wise. Anyway, so this poem. So continuing with the aging femininity business. This poem is called "The Change." You sit inside yourself, and your body does its thing. 1 minute, it's a honeypot of estrogen. The next, the head you had grown up with is a crucible, and the words flushes and flashes don't touch the sides of this urge to run clear of this chassis. The clothes in your wardrobe carry a whisper of mutton from a source buried deep inside language. You smear Lady Danger on muttony chops, and everywhere advice on how to hide your arms. Heaven forfend you make a spectacle of your collagen depletion. Every night your hormones throw a party you don't want to attend, messing with the levels like a bad DJ. You read that tinnitus is affected by estrogen's jitterbug, that not enough research has been done. Your skin is a rubber doll plumped up with lava that stumbled into a cold store at 4 a.m. So a lot of my arduous research, so I was writing and researching this book for about 4 or 5 years or something, my arduous research, watching movies, watching films, of course. And one of the most kind of witchy film, I don't know, I've written about The Witch and the Wizard of Oz, but this one is about the Craft, which was a 1996 film. And if you were kind of a goth teenager, you were right into this one. And the quote is from the film, it's from Nancy Downs. And the girls go to, they get taken on a bus to the graveyard, and they get off, and the bus driver says, watch out for the weirdos, girls, basically. And Nancy Downs says, we are the weirdos, mister. A sky full of rain meddles in through a rubble of roof tiles. Serpents unleash in all their forms, and the girls themselves are every manner of weaponless in their damaged orphan skins. Let's not focus on how it all turns out, but on the necessity of the coven, of pulling on an armour of black velvet and drinking of your sister's blood, elixir in a cup of wine gold Ariel, the angel of earth, fire, water, air. Each lit candle is a breath of light in the pitch. Oh, the urgency of the chanting. Now is the time, now is the hour, ours is the magic, ours is the power. And 27 years later, anonymous on YouTube's wall, I wouldn't be here without my sisters. This is my last one. Thank you very much for listening to me. Thanks for having us here, and thank you for so we could orchestrate to read with Julia and Tom. So this poem is based on a wood engraving by Frederick Sand of 1860, and it's called The Spirit of the Storm. And the Spirit of the Storm, she's Medusa, she's fierce. You can look this image up online, and anyway. The spirit of the storm. There comes a point in every woman's life when she transmutes into the spirit of the storm. Why not grow snakes for hair to conjure rain and lightning from your artful hands? You've earned this wrath, don't squander it on slapdash chores and sundry empty tasks in the hollow of your living room. Get out and find a fitting auditorium. They've been opining it for years. It should come as no surprise when venom spouts forth from your breasts. Lo, you are supreme, the most debauched of all bad mothers. Thank you.
Thank you, Helen. All bad mothers pay attention, I would say. And fathers too, of course. Thanks so much, Julia, Tom, Martin, and Helen, for this fantastic reading. And thank you, of course, Helen and Martin, for bringing us Tom and Julia. We're very grateful. And next, we move on to the open mic portion of the event. Cassandra?
I'm going to read John Wessex bio and introduce him.
Right.
Do you want to do that, Mark?
Yeah, of course. Sorry, John. I just start thinking 3 steps ahead. John Wessex has written over 1 million words in poems, short stories, and novels. Hundreds of his works have appeared in journals such as the I-70 Review, New Verse News, Patterson Literary Review, and Unlikely Stories Mark 5. John is a regional editor of the San Diego Poetry Annual and host of the Gelato East Fiction Open Mic. And his latest book, Redutio ad Absurdium, is a collection of parodies. And John lives in Manchester, New Hampshire, and longs for gene editing to bring giant wombats back from extinction. John.
Thank you, Mark. Was that two martinis today, or I don't know.
Two.
Anyway,
Two.
this one started as a joke because I always wanted everybody to do a poetry reading in a bad William Shatner accent, and then somebody said, "Oh, the wasteland," you know, and so we actually got together and we actually read The Wasteland in a bad Shatner accent. Three of us on Facebook. April is the coolest month. But anyway, this got me thinking, and I said, well, you know, what if T.S. Eliot had actually watched Star Trek? And so this is called The Warpland, or if T.S. Eliot watched Star Trek, and I'll just read the first of 5 sections. Heckmick, cock, jajfam, for Gene Roddenberry. 1. It's dead, Jim. 5928.5 is the cruelest star date. Breeding Bracken's world out of the airwaves, mixing westerns and cop shows, stirring Ironside with Nielsen ratings. Winter kept me enthralled, covering the Beta Quadrant and Klingons and Romulans, space battles and phasers and photon torpedoes. Summer surprised me, coming home from high school to a shower of reruns. I pulled weeds and rode a riding lawnmower and read Heinlein and ate TV dinners and thought of Christmas, our aluminum tree, colored red, yellow, green, and blue by rotating lights. Behind the lava lamp, Dad's ashtray and cigarette lighter shaped like a knight in armor. I watched Kirk spotting bones, end war and defeat bigotry in 50 minutes, plus commercials on the big console TV. Peace, freedom, justice, equality, civilization, the quest for knowledge. Who were the sponsors? What content grew out of this cultural wasteland? I dream of Jeannie, Gomer Pyle, Dragnet, and Adam 12, a heap of sweaty tropes where dollars rule and brain-dead scripts provoke no thought but silent majority preconceptions. You placed a lilac in a guardsman's rifle. They called you Kent State Lilac Girl. In return, the National Guard placed bullets in your chest and stomach. Despite 4 dead, the governor dined on steak, rare and bloody. The keeper of Talos 4, head big as a pumpkin, veins pulsing with psychic power, distracted America with fantasies, while its sons died unnoticed in Nam, like victims of simulated attacks on Eminiar 7. Who wouldn't prefer saving a sultry blonde from a fur-clad barbarian by an Arabian Nights castle, or feasting by a pool with a green-skinned dancer, to a gas crisis, stagflation, and wars of ego? Who wouldn't prefer the Love Boat, Columbo, All in the Family, Maud, the Jeffersons, to ideals betrayed and victories squandered? Those are flowers in the sky. Look, here is the Commodore, a door impervious to phasers, the lady bent and misshapen, now young and beautiful, a refuge for a hero crippled by radiation, locked in a wheelchair, unable to speak. Here he can be young and vital again. Iconic bridge, like a TV viewer, the captain sits in an easy chair watching the screen. Helmsman and navigator push buttons, flip rocker switches, and read analog dials. Red shirts, blue shirts, circles, stakeholders. The automatic door whispers whoosh. No one wears seatbelts in the 23rd century.
Well, it was magnificent. I do love a bit of Shatner. I enjoyed the green-skinned dancer as well. There's always strange things that pop up that I enjoy so much, John. You have such a unique voice. Absolutely adore it. It seems there's been people in the chat asking about open mic, and I have been responding. So Michelle, if you're still around, I have responded many times. I'm happy to put you in there, but I'm not sure if you're still around. So we're going to go with Linda first. Linda of the Aurora Borealis.
Hello, everybody. Okay. So this kind of starts out with nature references, and then it kind of wraps up with poetic and poet reference. So it's a little scattered, but after all, I'm a beat poet, so whatever. Unleashed. Last drops of rain collide, kiss skin, kiss grass, kiss trees, kiss soil, like a lover lost, like a lover's love, like a perfect love gone loveless. Gray clouds windswept across twilight sky, moon appears blue, blue moon rise, like a skyward bird, like a newborn star, like a sapphire's hue. Waves upend sand, sand ever moving, in patterns rippled, moon claims pull, like motion uncontrolled, like horsepower churns water, like tidal tsunami unceasing. Cool surrenders to cold, cold becomes frozen's sister, Arctic freeze succumbs to hypothermic cryonics, like a slow freeze, like an infinitesimal glacier, like heat-deprived lunacy. Solar bake, crust of earth, waters diminish, evaporation persists, browning of life, like overbaked terracotta, like a scorching desert drought, like a furnace from hell. A lit torch, flames aglow, casts light, heat, an accidental spread, fire maniacal, akin to book burning, like a conflagration, like torching loose letters, like ashen papers aloft. Rivers collect rain, drops become gallons, overflow their banks, deluge persists, floating flotsam finite, like saturation inherent, like swimmers languishing, like prayers of drowning sea captains. When writers take up arms with paper and pen, word processor or scroll, scribble concerns of minions, like on protest signs, like in anthologies, like in virtual spaces. It all gets noticed, read, spread in libraries, cafes, parks, sidewalks, parking lots, on Zooms. Poets are more substance than scheme, unleashing a decree, their metamorphosing dream. Thank you.
That was massive. I love the way that you have color in your poem. It's so vibrant. I love the blue moon section too. That was one of my favorites. Thank you. We love
Thank you.
Grace, Linda. It's awesome. And we're going to go to our favorite two for finishing the open, Cindy and Bob. There's no one quite like them as a duo. They're inspiring, they're witty, they're everything you want to be. Cindy, you're on mute.
Oh, I was muted. Now I don't hear you, but no, you said we were finishing up, Bob and me, and
Yeah.
I said we're not married like Helen and Martin are.
We never know. Like, it's early days. Bob,
Maybe
hurry up.
we're secretly married. So I've been trying to stay away from politics, but today, today's a political day. It's a short poem, as always. Sign seen at protest rally during Trump's self-aggrandizing and ridiculous military birthday parade. No kings, no kings, absolutely no kings. However, Jewish American princesses are more than welcome and highly encouraged.
That's why we love her, people. As if Cindy could stay away from politics. Cindy is politics. We love it.
Star.
See your Jewish star. It's gorgeous.
Jewish American.
Thank you so much. We're going to finish with Bob. I always say we don't know what he's going to do. He's quite wry. He's the kitchen laureate. He can pull anything out of the bag. He might have a paper clip attached to it. You never know. What have you got for us, Bob?
Okay, this is something recent. It does have a paper clip attached to it because it hasn't been transcribed yet. And it's a little bit different. And it's very short, as usual. Her clawed hands bound with flowered vines. Her voice an echo of the distance found. Her song an assembling of the separate sounds that fell upon her.
And that's what he does that we love so much. There's that wonderful moment at the end where you're like, ooh. So Mark, ooh, back to you.
When they fell upon her, what beautiful poem, Bob.
Thank you.
This one's called Methodology in a Fictional Landscape. But the tropes endured and confused themselves with someone else, someone uneventful, someone who eventually became someone else, someone utterly unknown in the deepest wrinkles of mythology, I'm afraid to say. Thank you, everybody, for such a wonderful show. And I hope to see you guys next time, which won't be that long. It's in 2 weeks. We have a great crew. So come by and join us. But thank you so much for tonight. Thank you, Helen, Martin, especially for helping put this together. And lots of love. And don't worry, we'll be fine. Cheers, guys.